Hi guys! Before we start chapter number 3, let's recall what we learned in chapter number 2. That is on the trail of the earliest people. We know about people who lived in the subcontinent, that is the Indian subcontinent, as early as 2 million years ago. So people started living in the Indian subcontinent in about 2 million years ago. Then there are at least 4 reasons why hunter-gatherers moved from place to place. First, if they had stayed at one place for a long time, they would have eaten up all the available plants and animal resources. Therefore, they would have had to go elsewhere in search of food. Second, animals move from place to place, either in search of small prey or, in the case of deer and wild cattle, in search of grass and leaves. That is why those who hunted them had to follow their movements. Third, plants and trees bear fruits in different seasons, so people may have moved from season to season in search of different kinds of plants. Number 4. People, plants, and animals need water to survive. Water is found in lakes, streams, and rivers. While many rivers and lakes are perennial, others are seasonal. People living in these banks would have had to go in search of water during the dry seasons, that is, the winter and summer. Besides, people may have traveled to meet their friends and relatives, and they traveled by foot. Some of these stones they were used to cut meat and bone, scrap bark from trees and hides animal skins, chop fruits and roots. Some may have been attached to handles of bone or wood to make spears and arrows for hunting. Other tools were used to chop wood, which was used as firewood. Wood was also used to make huts and tools. Places where stone was found and where people made tools are known as factory. And we have this habitation cum factory. Sometimes people lived here for longer spells of time, so these sites are called habitation cum factory sites. Stone tools were probably made using two different techniques. The first one is stone on stone, and the another one is pressure flaking. So what happens in stone on stone is that we are going to have a core stone from which we want to make the stone tool, and another stone will be there which we are going to hit on the core in order to make the desired shape which we want. And let's come to pressure flaking. Here the core was placed on a firm surface first, and then after that the hammer stone was used on a piece of bone or stone that was placed on the core. So above the core we are going to put a piece of stone or a piece of bone, and then on this piece of stone or the piece of bone is going to be hit by the hammer stone. So we are going to hit the piece of bone or the stone which is placed above the core stone by a hammer stone. So this is being done to remove flakes that could be shaped into tools. So in the Kurnool caves we found ashes, so it shows the sign of fire. And around 12,000 years ago there were major changes in the climate of the world, with a shift to relatively warm condition. In many areas this led to the development of grasslands. It is likely that this helped people to start thinking about herding and rearing these animals themselves. Fishing also became important. This was also a time when several grain-bearing grasses, including wheat, barley, and rice, grew naturally in different parts of the subcontinent. So, archaeologists have given lengthy names for the time that we are studying. So the first one is called the Paleolithic. Paleo, it means old. Lithos means stone, so it means old stone. So the time duration will be 2 million years ago to about 12,000 years. This is a very long time, and we can say that it takes the lifespan of about 99% of the human history. And as Paleolithic is very long, we have divided into three time span. So the first one is the lower Paleolithic, the the second one is the middle Paleolithic, and so the first one we call it as the lower Paleolithic, second one is the middle Paleolithic, and the last one is the upper Paleolithic. Okay, the second period is called as the Mesolithic, that is middle stone, and the time span is from 12,000 years ago to 10,000 years ago. And the last one is the Neolithic, it would be new stone. This will be new stone, and this will be about 10,000 years ago. Then after this we have rock paintings. So rock paintings example, we see them on the walls of caves in Madhya Pradesh and southern Uttar Pradesh. Then this comes to an end of chapter 2. So let's start chapter number. Okay. So let's start chapter number 3. From gathering to growing fruit. Okay, so this is Nino's lunch. Nino was eating her favorite fruit, boiled rice, squash, pumpkins, beans, and meat. Her grandmother had grown the squash, pumpkin, and beans in the little garden plot at the back of her house. She remembered the food had been so different when she had been in Madhya Pradesh as part of a school trip. It was hot and spicy. Why was that so? Varieties of foods. Today, most of our food, such as fruits, vegetables, grain, milk, and meat, comes from plants that are grown and animals that are reared. Different plants grow in different conditions. Rice, for example, requires more water than wheat and barley. This explains why farmers grow some crops in some areas and not in other areas. Different animals too prefer different environments. For instance, sheep and goat can survive more easily than cattle in dry, hilly environments. But as you saw in chapter 2, women and men did not always produce their own food. The beginnings of farming and herding. We have seen in chapter 2 that the climate of the world was changing, and so were plants and animals that people used as food. Men, women, and children probably observed several things: the places where edible plants were found, how seeds broke off stalks, fell on the ground, and new plants sprouted from them. Perhaps they began looking after plants, protecting them from birds and animals so that they could grow and the seeds could ripen. In this way, people became farmers. Women, men, and children could also attract and then tame animals by leaving food for them near their shelters. The first animal to be tamed was the wild ancestor of the dog. first animal to be tamed was the wild ancestor of the dog. Later, people encouraged animals that were relatively gentle to come near the camps where they lived. These animals must be sheep, goat, cattle, and also pigs. Lived in herds, and most of them ate grass. Often, people protected these animals from attacks by other wild animals. This is how they became herders. Can you think of any reason why the dog was perhaps the first animal to be tamed? Domestication. Domestication is a name given to the process in which people grow plants and look after animals. So, domestication is the name given to the people in which is the name given to the process in which people grow plants and look after animals. Very often, plants and animals that are tended by people become different from wild plants and animals. This is because people select plants and animals for domestication. For example, they select those plants and animals that are not prone to disease. They also select plants that yield larger size grain and have strong stalks capable of bearing the weight of the ripe grain. Seeds from selected plants are preserved and sown to ensure that new plants and seeds will have the same qualities. Amongst animals, those that are relatively gentle are selected for breeding. As a result, gradually domesticated animals and plants become different from wild animals and plants. For example, the teeth and horns of wild animals are usually much larger than those of domesticated animals. Look at these two sets of teeth. What do you think? Which do you think belongs to a wild pig and which is a domesticated animal? I think the bigger teeth. This must be for the wild pig and this must be for the domesticated pig. Domestication was a gradual process that took place in many parts of the world. It began about 12,000 years ago. So, domestication. Domestication, okay. Uh, Domestication, it began about 12,000 years ago. Virtually all the plants and animal produce that we use as food today is a result of domestication. Some of the earliest plants to be domesticated were wheat and barley. The earliest domesticated animals include sheep and goat. Ways in which grain was used as seed. Okay, they were used as seed as food, as gifts stored for food. A new way of life. If you plant a seed, you will notice that it takes some time to grow. This may be for several days, weeks, months, and in some cases, years. When people began growing plants, it meant that they had to stay in the same place for a long time, looking after the plants, watering, weeding, driving away animals and birds till the grain ripened. And then the grains had to be used carefully, as grain had to be stored for both food and seed. People had to think of ways of storing it. In many areas, they began making large clay pots. Making they began making large clay pots and wove baskets or dug pits into the ground. Do you think hunter gatherers would have made and used pots? Give reasons for your answer. I do not think hunters and gatherers would have used pots. They might have eaten it all up. There might not have been requirement for storing it. Storing animals. Animals multiply naturally. Besides, if they are looked after carefully, they provide milk, which is an important source of food and meat. Animals multiply naturally. Besides, if they are looked after carefully, they provide milk, which is an important source of food, and meat whenever required. In other words, animals that are reared can be used as a store of food. That's true. They themselves are a store of food, and we can get milk and we can get meat. Apart from food, what are the other things that could have been obtained from animals? What are animals used for today? Finding out about the first farmers and herders. Turn to map 2, page 14. You will notice a number of blue squares. Each marks a site from where archaeologists have found evidence of early farmers and herders. These are found all over the subcontinent. Some of the most important ones are in the northwest in present-day Kashmir and in East and South India. To find out whether these cities were settlements of farmers and herders, scientists study evidence of plants and animal bones. One of the most exciting finds includes remains of burnt grain. These may have been burnt accidentally or on purpose. Scientists can identify these grains, and so we know that a number of crops were grown in different parts of the subcontinent. They can also identify the bones of different animals. Look at the table below to see where evidence of grain and bones of domesticated animals have been found. So grain and bones, and these are the sites: wheat, barley, sheep, goat, cattle, Mahegger in present-day Pakistan, rice, fragmentary animal bones, Koldewa in present-day Uttar Pradesh, rice, cattle, hoof marks on clay surface, Mahagara in present-day Uttar Pradesh, wheat and lentil, Gufkral in present-day Kashmir, wheat and lentil, dog, cattle, sheep, goat, buffalo, Burjahom in present-day Kashmir. Wheat, green gram, barley, buffalo, ox, Girand in present-day Bihar. Millet, cattle, sheep, goat, pig, Halur in present-day Andhra Pradesh. Black gram, millet, cattle, sheep, pig, Payampali in present-day Andhra Pradesh. These are just some of the sites from which grain and bones have been found. Towards a settled life, archaeologists have found traces of huts or houses at some sites. For instance, in Burjahom, in present-day Kashmir, people built pit houses, which were dug into the ground with steps leading into them. So Burjahom in present-day Kashmir, people built pit houses, which were dug into the ground with steps leading into them. These may have provided shelter in cold weather. Archaeologists have also found cooking huts both inside and outside the huts, which suggests that depending on the weather, people could cook food either indoors or outdoors. Then stone tools have been found from many sites as well. Many of these are different from the earlier Paleolithic tools, and that is why they are called Neolithic. These include tools that were polished to give a fine cutting edge, and mortars and pestles. Polished to give a fine cutting edge. Mortars and pestles used for grinding grain and other plant produce. Mortars and pestles are used for grinding grain even today, several thousand years ago later. At the same time, tools of the Paleolithic types continued to be made and used. And remember, some tools were also made of bone. New stone tools. Compare these with the tools shown on page 13, chapter 2. Can you see any similarities or differences? This will be for Neolithic. Many kinds of earthen pots have also been found. Many kinds of earthen pots have also been found. These were sometimes decorated and were used for storing things. People began using pots for cooking food, especially grains like rice, wheat, and lentils that now became an important part of the diet. What do you think could have been stored in this jar? Besides, they began weaving cloth. Besides, they also began weaving clothes using different kinds of materials. For example, they used cotton that could now be grown. So they make pots and they weaved clothes also. Did things change everywhere and all at once? Not quite. In many areas, men and women still continue to hunt and gather food, and elsewhere, people adopted farming and herding slowly over several thousand years. Besides, in some cases, people tried to combine these activities, doing different things during different seasons. What about other customs and practices? Archaeology does not tell us directly about these. Scholars have studied the lives of present day farmers who practice simple agriculture. They have also studied the lives of herders. Many of these farmers and herders live in groups called tribes. Scholars find that they follow certain customs and practices that may have existed earlier as well. Tribes. Usually, 2 to 3 generations live together in small settlements or villages. Most families are related to one another, and groups of such families form a tribe. Usually, 2 to 3 generations live together in small settlements or villages. Most families are related to one another, and groups of such families form a tribe. Members of a tribe follow occupations such as hunting, gathering, farming, herding, and fishing. Usually, women do most of the agricultural work, including preparing the ground, sowing seeds, looking after the growing plants, and harvesting grain. Children often look after plants, driving away animals and birds that might eat them. Women also thrash, husk, and grind grain. Men usually lead large herds of animals in search of pasture. Children often look after small flocks. The cleaning of animals and milking is done by both men and women. Both women and men make pots, baskets, tools, and huts. They also take part in singing, dancing, and decorating their huts. Some men are regarded as leaders. They may be old and experienced, or young, brave warriors or priests. Old women are respected for their wisdom and experience. Tribes have rich and unique cultural traditions, including their own language, their own music, their own stories and paintings. Tribes have rich and unique cultural traditions, including their own language, culture, stories, and paintings. They also have their own gods and goddesses. What makes tribes different from many other societies you will be studying about is that land, forest, grasslands, and water are regarded as the wealth of the entire tribe, and everybody shares and uses this together. There are no sharp differences between the rich and the poor. Make a list of all the activities performed by men in tribal societies. What do women do? Are there any activities that are done by both men and women? A closer look, living and dying in Mahegger village. One of the distinctive features of a village is that most people who live there are engaged in food production. Find Mahegger on map 2, page 14. This site is located in a fertile plain near the Bolan Pass, which is one of the most important routes into Iran. Mahegger was probably one of the places where women and men learned to grow barley and wheat and rear sheep and goats for the first time in this area. Mahegger is probably one of the places where men and women learned to grow barley and wheat and rear sheep and goats for the first time in this area. It is one of the earliest villages that we know about. Archaeologists who excavated the site found evidence of many kinds of animal bones from the earliest levels. These included bones of wild animals such as deer and pig. In later levels, they found more bones of sheep and goat, and in still later levels, cattle bones are most common, suggesting that this was the animal that was generally kept by the people. Earlier, okay, so the animals that were found first, it was sheep and goats. Earlier and later levels. When archaeologists are digging at an excavation site, how do they know which level is earlier and which is later? Look at the illustration. Suppose people first start living on flatland, layer 4. Flatland, layer 4. Over the years, the surface will gradually rise because people discard waste material and generally stay and rebuild houses in the same place. After hundreds of years, this leads to the formation of a mold. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it becomes a mold. So when this mold is dug up, what is found from the upper layers of the mold is generally from a later time than what is found from the lower layers of the mold, which is older. These upper and lower layers are often referred to as levels. Look at layer 2 and 3. Which do you think is the earlier level? Earlier level would be 3. Other finds at Mehergar include remains of square or rectangular houses. Each house had 4 or more compartments, some of which may have been used for storage. Square or rectangular houses. So we are finding square or rectangular houses. Each house had 4 or more compartments, some of which may have been used for storage. When people die, their relatives and friends generally pay respect to them. People look after them, perhaps in the belief that there is some form of life after death. Burial is one such arrangement. Several burial sites have been found in Mehergar. In one instance, the dead person was buried with goats, which were probably meant to serve as food in the next life. A house in Mahegger. This is what a house. This is what a house in Mahegger may have looked like. In what ways is this house similar to the one in which you live? When people die, their relatives and friends generally pay respect to them. People look after them, perhaps in the belief that there is some form of life after death. Burial is one such arrangement. Several burial sites have been found in Mehergar. In some instances, the dead person was buried with gods, which were probably meant to serve as food in the next world. A burial from Mehergar. Can you identify the skeletons of the gods? Keywords: domestication, farmers, herders, Neolithic, pots, tribes, village, houses, burials. A closer look. Daujali Hadding. Daujali Hadding. Finding Daujali Hadding. Heading on map 2, page 14. This is a site on the hills near the Brahmaputra Valley, close to routes leading into China and Myanmar. Here stone tools including mortars and pestles have been found. These indicate that people were probably growing grain and preparing food from it. Other finds include jaded, a stone that may have been brought from China. Also common are finds of tools made of fossil wood, ancient wood that has hardened into stone and pottery. This is the site of the hills near the Brahmaputra Valley, close to routes leading to China and Myanmar. Here stone tools including mortars and pestles have been found. These indicate that people were probably growing grain and preparing food from it. Other finds include jaded, a stone that may have been brought from China. Also common are finds of tools made of fossil wood, ancient wood that has hardened into stone and pottery. Elsewhere, find Turkey in your atlas, one of the most famous Neolithic sites. Katalhuyuk was found in Turkey. Several things were brought from great distances: flint from Syria, cowries from the Red Sea, shells from the Mediterranean Sea, and used in the settlement. Remember, there were no carts. Most things would have been carried on the backs of pack animals such as cattle or by people. What do you think cowries and shells would have been used for? Imagine you are in charge of a small plot of land and have to decide what food crops to grow. What are the plants you would choose? Where would you get the seeds from? How would you plant them? How would you look after your plants? And when would they be ready for harvesting? Okay, some important dates. Let's see some important dates. Beginnings of domestication about 12,000 years ago. Beginning of domestication about 12,000 years ago. Beginning of settlement at Mahegger about 8,000 about 8 uh, about 8,000 years ago. Millets have been found in Halur. True. People in Burjahom lived in rectangular houses. It's true. Jirand is a site in Kashmir. This is false. It's there in Bihar. Jadet found in Daujali Hading may have been brought from China. It's true. Bye guys.